He was the beloved star of some of the most iconic family shows on television, always playing the strong, kind, dependable father figure everyone wished they had. But behind the scenes, Michael Landon was living with a side of himself that most people never saw. He was a man who carried deep secrets, heartbreaking scars, and a haunting past he never fully outran. Years after his death, one of his daughters has finally opened up about a shocking secret that her father never talked about. She has revealed the burden he carried quietly and a decision she believes he would have deeply regretted. Her revelation is extremely heartbreaking, and once you hear what it is, you'll understand why. The childhood trauma that fueled his drive. Michael Landon wasn't born into fame. In fact, his early years were quite chaotic. Born Eugene Maurice Orowitz on October 31, 1936, in Queens, New York, Michael's life started in a home that was already divided in more ways than one. His father, Eli Maurice Orowitz, was a Jewish actor and theater manager, while his mother, Peggy O'Neill, came from an Irish Catholic background and had worked as a dancer and comedian. On paper, that may have sounded like the perfect match. But in reality, their differences, especially religious ones, created a deep emotional tension within the home. His mother made it no secret that she resented her husband's religious background, and her bitterness seeped into how she treated their son. During what should have been a proud and meaningful moment in Michael's life, his bar mitzvah, a symbolic rite of passage in the Jewish faith, his mother leaned over and quietly told him something that stunned him. She had secretly baptized him as a baby. It was meant to invalidate his spiritual identity, and that memory stuck with him. That kind of rejection from a parent cuts deep, and for young Michael, it was extremely confusing. But religion wasn't the only source of trauma in his childhood. His mother, Peggy, struggled severely with mental health issues, and behind closed doors, the family endured a cycle of emotional instability that left scars. Michael often witnessed deeply distressing moments at home, including times when his mother was struggling so severely that she put herself in danger, and the emotional toll of those moments never really left him. The tension in the home was constant, and Michael bore the brunt of it in deeply personal ways. He developed chronic bedwetting, something many children experience under stress, but instead of receiving compassion, he was met with shame. His mother would hang his soiled bed sheets outside the bedroom window for the neighborhood to see. For a boy already living in fear and confusion, it was public humiliation and a reminder that there was no safe space for him, not even in his own home. Years later, he would channel this pain into art. In 1976, Michael wrote and directed The Loneliest Runner, a semi-autobiographical film that told the story of a boy dealing with bedwetting and a cold, unloving mother. It was raw, emotional, and one of the most personal projects of his career. That film wasn't just a story, it was a release. Despite the chaos at home, Michael found solace and self-worth in athletics. At school, he became a standout javelin thrower, impressing coaches and earning recognition for his strength and focus. It was one of the few areas in his life where he felt in control. His dedication paid off when he earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California for his athletic talent. This scholarship felt like a way out and a ticket to a better life. But fate had other plans. A shoulder injury ended his athletic dreams abruptly. For someone who had pinned so much hope on that one escape route, it was a devastating blow. The scholarship vanished, and with it, the structure and direction he had worked so hard to achieve. Struggling to find purpose, Michael took odd jobs to get by. One of them was at a gas station in Los Angeles, not far from the Warner Brothers studio lot. It was during one of his shifts that he caught the eye of a talent agent, a chance encounter that would change the course of his life forever. With encouragement to explore acting, he made a decision that would mark a turning point. He changed his name from Eugene Orowitz to Michael Landon. The new name, chosen from a phone book, was more than a stage identity. It was a new beginning, where he could bury the trauma of his past and shape a future on his own terms. In 1957, Michael landed his first breakout role in the cult horror film I Was a Teenage Werewolf. It might not have been Oscar material, but it made people notice him. He had the kind of artistic presence that couldn't be taught. He stood out not just because of his looks, but because of an intensity behind his eyes that suggested he'd lived through more than he ever let on. Soon, bigger opportunities came, and when he was cast as Little Joe Cartwright in the long-running Western series Bonanza in 1959, it was clear that Michael Landon had arrived. The show became a massive hit, and Landon, with his rugged charm and deep emotional range, became a household name. His ability to play both strong and sensitive roles made him one of the most relatable figures on television. But Landon didn't stop there. After Bonanza ended in 1973, he seamlessly transitioned into a new chapter of his career by creating and starring in Little House on the Prairie, which ran for 9 seasons. This show was more than just entertainment. It was a values-driven, emotionally resonant series that reached millions of families across generations. Then came Highway to Heaven in 1984, a spiritual drama in which Landon played an angel sent to help people on Earth. It was ideal for him because he played a moral compass figure who could guide others through pain, offering hope and healing. By the mid-1980s, Michael Landon had become one of the most recognizable faces in American television. He wasn't just famous, he was trusted, admired, and loved. But even as he reached the peak of success, there were rumors and secrets that followed him, as well as stories that never made it into interviews or magazine covers. Although he never quite addressed some of them during his lifetime, one of his daughters eventually stepped forward to speak the truth. The hidden struggles that haunted Landon. Michael Landon may have radiated warmth and stability on screen, but behind the scenes, he was wrestling with demons that never quite left him. The polished image of a loving father figure and spiritual guide on television masked a far more complex reality that was built on pain, discipline, and a desperate need for control. Landon later admitted that he coped with stress in unhealthy ways. He was a heavy smoker who also struggled with excessive alcohol intake, especially in his younger years, though he rarely appeared intoxicated publicly. For Landon, smoking and drinking weren't just habits. They were a form of self-medication. They dulled the anxiety, eased the pressure, and gave him momentary relief from a mind that never stopped racing. He once acknowledged that he used humor to mask his pain. He could disarm anyone with a joke or a grin, but that lightheartedness mostly hid something far darker. Beneath the charm was a relentless drive to stay busy and to keep moving. Landon's schedule was famously packed. As a writer, director, producer, and star of many of his shows, he poured himself completely into his work, sometimes to the point of obsession. Colleagues noted that he had an almost compulsive need to control every detail. Some saw it as a reflection of his perfectionism. Others suspected it was his way of keeping the chaos at bay. Work was where he had power and where the outcome could be managed. It was nothing like the volatile household he'd grown up in, where emotional explosions could come at any moment. Unfortunately, even as his fame grew, personal tragedy was never far behind. In 1959, the same year Bonanza premiered and launched Landon into stardom, his father died suddenly of a heart attack. Landon was completely devastated, and the timing was cruel. At a moment when his career was just taking off, he was forced to grieve a loss that would leave a lasting impact on him. His father had been a complicated figure who was supportive in some ways, but also part of the fraught family dynamic that haunted Landon's early years. His death closed the door on the possibility of reconciliation, and that regret seemed to linger. Then, in 1973, tragedy struck again, this time involving his daughter Cheryl. Though she wasn't his biological child, Landon had adopted Cheryl when he married her mother, Lynn No, and treated her as his own. That year, Cheryl was involved in a horrific car crash that left her seriously injured and claimed the life of her boyfriend. The accident devastated the entire family, and Landon was reportedly distraught and struggled to process the enormity of what had happened. Though Cheryl survived, the trauma added another layer of emotional weight to a man who was already carrying so much. But that wasn't the only struggle he had to face. Landon was often described as a generous and kind-hearted person, someone who gave crew members financial support, treated them like family, and made it a point to create a positive environment on set. But there was another side to him that most fans never heard about. Those who worked closely with him spoke of his controlling nature, his sharp temper, and the intense pressure he placed on himself and everyone around him. At times, his mood could shift quickly, from playful and encouraging to cutting and impatient. And it was a contradiction many found hard to reconcile. Some of his colleagues blamed his behavior on the stress of running a major production, but those who knew him best believed it went deeper. Landon had an almost pathological need to maintain order and predictability, perhaps because he had grown up in a world where there was none. That desire for control eventually extended to his personal relationships too, and this created a tension at home that would later cause strain in his marriages. But at the heart of it all was a man constantly battling insecurity. Despite his success, Landon never quite believed he was good enough. The trauma of his childhood had carved deep wounds, and no amount of fame, accolades, or audience love could fully heal them. His drive for perfection, his resistance to vulnerability, and even his humor all pointed to someone who felt that, at any moment, the life he had built could fall apart. But still, he kept going. The show had to go on. The smile had to stay in place, and the scripts had to be finished. Whenever Landon was hurting, he rarely let it show in ways the public could see. But not everything could stay buried forever. As he entered the later chapters of his career, the cracks in his image began to widen. Controversies emerged, rumors spread, and eventually, personal scandals would push Michael Landon into headlines for reasons he couldn't control and never wanted to face. Controversies and public scandals. Michael Landon had built his career on portraying moral strength, compassion, and the kind of steadfast father figure audiences across America trusted. But behind the cameras, his personal life became increasingly difficult to separate from the characters he played. And when the carefully constructed image began to crack, it did so very publicly. Perhaps the most damaging controversy of his life erupted during the production of Little House on the Prairie, a show that had come to define his reputation as a wholesome family man. By the early 1980s, fans saw him as the ideal husband and father, not just on screen, but off it as well. So when news broke that Landon had formed a romantic relationship with an aspiring actress on the show, it sent shockwaves through his fan base. The woman at the center of the scandal was Cindy Clarico, who was just 18 when she started working on the set. At the time, Landon was already in his early 40s, married and a father to several children. Their connection, which initially began quietly, grew into something more serious, and eventually, it became impossible to hide. In 1982, Landon ended his nearly 20-year marriage to his second wife, Marjorie Lynn No. Together, they had raised 5 children, including Cheryl, who was Marjorie's daughter from a previous relationship and whom Landon had adopted. The divorce hit hard, especially because it wasn't just a private matter. It was public, messy, and scrutinized from every angle. Many fans felt betrayed because they had idealized Landon's real-life marriage as an extension of his on-screen persona. However, after the divorce, his perfect image collapsed, and some viewed his actions as a personal failure, while others saw it as a reflection of deeper hypocrisy. For a man whose career was built on values like loyalty, integrity, and love, the affair was more than just a personal decision. It was a direct blow to his credibility. But the cracks in Landon's public image didn't stop with his personal relationships. Behind the scenes, stories began to surface about his behavior on set. These shocking revelations painted a far more complicated picture than the generous leader he was often described as. Some of Landon's co-stars recalled him as being intense, controlling, and prone to emotional outbursts when things didn't go his way. There was even a quote circulating from a cast member on Little House on the Prairie, Allison Arngrim, who described him as mad, bad, and dangerous to know. This dramatic statement was extremely controversial because it contradicted everything audiences thought they knew about him. But the scandals didn't end there for Landon. He was known to make inappropriate and playful remarks about his energy and vitality, even once joking that he owed it to bee pollen supplements, which he discussed frequently enough to make people uncomfortable. While some on set laughed it off, others found it inappropriate and invasive, especially given the family-oriented nature of the show and the presence of young cast members. While Landon was viewed as a polite and funny figure on television, in reality, there were moments when his temper boiled over. Outside the studio walls, Landon's relationship with the media also became increasingly fraught. Early in his career, he had been open, friendly, and eager to share his story. But as the years passed, and particularly after the scandal with Cindy Clerico, he grew guarded and even defensive. He felt that journalists were less interested in his work and more obsessed with digging into his personal life. At one point, the tension reached a breaking point when Landon had a physical altercation with a reporter who had pushed too hard with personal questions about his family. Landon himself later acknowledged the incident, and although it didn't get widespread coverage at the time, perhaps out of respect for his fame, it was known within Hollywood circles. For many, it marked a turning point. Landon, once celebrated for his easygoing charm, had become someone people approached with caution. In his later years, he became more private, choosing to retreat from interviews and limit his public appearances. Some attributed this shift to burnout, others to a desire to protect his third marriage and rebuild his family. But there was also the sense that Landon no longer trusted the public gaze, and that he had been wounded by it and was unwilling to expose himself any further. Despite the controversy, he remained a respected figure in the industry. His contributions to television were undeniable, and his shows continued to resonate with audiences. But there was a quiet recognition that the man himself was not the flawless hero he often portrayed. He was layered, complicated, and, like so many others, deeply human. Still, just as the conversation around him began to cool, another chapter that would once again draw millions of eyes back to Michael Landon began. Only this time, it wasn't about a scandal or a public fight. It was about something no amount of fame or strength could stop: the heartbreaking diagnosis. In the spring of 1991, Michael Landon was still very much in the public eye. He was working, planning, and spending time with his family, seemingly as strong and tireless as ever. But in early April of that year, everything changed. After suffering from severe, persistent stomach pain, Landon sought medical attention, expecting to receive news of perhaps an ulcer or something manageable. However, what he received instead was a devastating, life-altering diagnosis. Doctors informed him that he had pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and unforgiving forms of the disease. And by the time it was discovered, it had already spread to his liver and lymph nodes, and at this stage it wasn't curable anymore. For Landon, a man who had always pushed through adversity, this news was earth-shattering. He had overcome so much in his life, from trauma to setbacks and scandals, but somehow always emerged stronger. But this time was different, because pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate or wait. It advances quickly, leaving little time to prepare or fight back. Despite the grim prognosis, Landon eventually decided to fight the disease. He began chemotherapy, hoping to slow the spread of the cancer. He also explored holistic treatments and experimental therapies, determined to exhaust every possible option. He also consulted alternative medicine experts, adjusted his diet, and leaned into his physical and spiritual strength. But even the most aggressive interventions offered only temporary relief. As the weeks passed, Landon finally made the difficult decision to step away from the public spotlight and spend whatever time he had left at home. He retreated to his Malibu ranch, a peaceful place tucked away from the chaos of Hollywood. There, he focused on what mattered most: his wife Cindy, their children, and a few close friends. The man who had built a career around stories of family and connection now found himself living the most intimate chapter of all, facing mortality surrounded by love. Still, Landon didn't disappear completely. In May 1991, he made one final public appearance on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and it was a moment that stunned fans. He had lost a significant amount of weight, and though his sense of humor was still intact, there was a visible sadness in his eyes. That final media appearance was emotional, raw, and difficult to watch, especially for those who had grown up with him as a constant presence on their television screens. Landon used the appearance not to ask for sympathy, but to speak candidly about his illness. He expressed gratitude for the support he'd received and emphasized the importance of staying strong and positive in the face of unimaginable difficulty. His honesty touched millions of people and reminded them that even their heroes could hurt. Despite his physical decline, Landon remained mentally sharp and emotionally grounded in those final months. He spent long afternoons with his children, told stories, and tried to preserve as much normalcy as he could. Sadly, on July 1st, 1991, Michael Landon passed away at the age of 54. The news sent a wave of grief across the country. Fans, co-stars, and even casual viewers felt the loss deeply. He had been part of their lives for decades, through Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and Highway to Heaven. He wasn't just an actor, he had become a symbol of comfort, stability, and hope. His funeral was private, and he was laid to rest at Hillside Memorial Park Cemetery in Culver City, California, in a private mausoleum, away from the public eye. It was a quiet goodbye for a man whose life had been so publicly lived. Even in death, Landon's legacy endured. His shows continued to air in syndication, introducing him to new generations of viewers. For many, he represented something timeless and a reminder of a more innocent era of television, where stories could still teach, heal, and inspire. But while the public mourned, those closest to him carried something deeper. They had witnessed the private pain behind the fame, and some of them, especially his daughter Leslie, would eventually break their silence to share what the world never knew about Michael Landon's final days. She finally opened up, not just about the illness, but about the truths he left behind. Leslie's revelations on Michael's final years. After Michael Landon's death, the silence from his family was respectful but heavy. For years, they kept their memories close and honored him in quiet ways. But eventually, his daughter, Leslie Landon, a former actress turned psychologist, decided it was time to speak, and she began opening up about the man the public thought they knew and the deeper truths that lived behind closed doors. One of the most revealing moments came when Leslie spoke about her father's approach to his health. Despite being a man who seemed to have endless energy and charisma, in reality, Landon actually had a complicated relationship with doctors. According to Leslie, he simply didn't go to the doctor regularly and often dismissed signs that something might be wrong. She revealed that he was strong and driven, but, like many men of his generation, he believed in pushing through discomfort rather than slowing down to address it. Leslie reflected on how that mindset ultimately cost him, and in one particularly emotional interview, she said, "I think if my dad were alive today, he would say, 'Boy, I blew it.'" Those words were filled with sadness and hard-earned clarity. She believed, with conviction, that early detection might have made a difference. And now, as a mental health professional and public speaker, she uses her platform to encourage people to prioritize their well-being, to not ignore warning signs, and to understand that strength sometimes means knowing when to ask for help. While Leslie took a path of healing and advocacy, her siblings carried on their father's creative legacy in other ways. Michael Landon Jr., Christopher Landon, and Jennifer Landon have all pursued careers in film and television, each in their own distinctive way. Michael Jr. became a successful producer and director, often working on projects that echo his father's emotionally rich storytelling style. He's known for creating family-oriented content with depth and moral complexity, much like the shows his father built his career on. Christopher Landon, meanwhile, made his mark in a different corner of Hollywood. He built a career in horror and thrillers, directing and writing films such as Happy Death Day and Freaky. His work may be more irreverent, but the creativity, discipline, and strong sense of character all nod back to his father's influence. But perhaps the most publicly visible of Landon's children in recent years has been Jennifer Landon. Audiences today know her as Teeter on the hit series Yellowstone, where she plays a tough, foul-mouthed, unforgettable ranch hand. Her portrayal has earned widespread acclaim, and many fans have drawn connections between her grit and the legacy of her famous father. Jennifer has openly credited her father with inspiring her work ethic and passion for storytelling. Though she was still quite young when he passed away, the impact he had on her never faded. In interviews, she's shared that growing up with him, even briefly, instilled in her a deep love for performing and a belief in the power of television to connect with people on an emotional level. Her success is more than a tribute. It's a continuation of the Landon name in modern television. But one of the most touching contributions to Landon's legacy came not from the children he raised after Little House, but from the daughter who was there before it all began, Cheryl Landon. Cheryl, Landon's eldest daughter from his second marriage, wrote a deeply personal memoir titled I Promised My Dad. In it, she reflects on the unique bond they shared that was shaped not just by love, but by survival. After surviving that horrific car crash in 1973, Michael had sat by her hospital bed, holding her hand through surgeries and rehab, and never leaving her side. During those long nights, she says he made a promise that if she pulled through, he would create something meaningful out of the pain they had both endured. Years later, he created Highway to Heaven, the spiritual series that showcased hope, healing, and redemption. According to Cheryl, it was born from that promise. She believes that the show wasn't just television, it was his atonement, his gift, and his way of fulfilling a sacred vow to his daughter and to himself. In her book, Cheryl also wrote about the man behind the myth. She didn't sugarcoat his flaws, but she honored his intentions. She painted a picture of a father who was far from perfect, but who never stopped trying to love, to protect, and to repair what had been broken. As time goes on, the public memory of Michael Landon may look complicated, but thanks to his children, we now also see the real man who was flawed and passionate, but still loved deeply and inspired many. And perhaps that's the legacy that matters most. What's your favorite memory of Michael Landon? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates.